Welcome back to my garden. Last week, my brother, who is a keen follower of this channel, and we exchange a lot of ideas about the content, put me onto a truly wonderful book. In the spirit of my videos, I can't quite remember the title. It has the unusual made-up word, Brainjo in it, and it's written by Josh Turkins. Now, Brainjo is an amalgamation of banjo and brain, which is not a complete surprise because, first of all, it's a book about, on the surface, learning to play the banjo, slightly more deeply about learning to play any musical instrument. But it's really a book about learning. And Josh himself is a neuroscientist and an expert banjo player. Brainjo is a website. Please excuse the hand waving, but there's a sort of end of rainy season, quite the end, inundation of flying insects. So there's just no way of getting away from a lot of flapping on my part. Literal flapping as well as my normal mental flaps as I try and can sort of navigate my way through an unprepared talk. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. So I duly bought a Kindle version of Brainjo, and I'm about 2/3 the way through and absolutely loving it. It's a true revelation. The book is a sort of a compilation of 32 articles that Josh has written and sort of tied together, neatly packaged, about the learning process. But it brought to mind, for me, someone with a maths background, this idea of the isomorphism. And isomorphism is when two mathematical systems perfectly map onto each other. And if they do, then a proof in one essentially gives you a proof in the other. Once you've demonstrated that this mapping exists, if you can show something is true in one area, its sort of decoded, remapped version in the other must therefore also be true. And at a certain point, Josh actually mentions that, in fact, a few times he's mentioned it. Well, this is certainly true of learning to play the banjo or an instrument, but it's probably true of learning in general. And frankly, every single section so far, and as I say, I think I'm on 23 out of 32, every single one seems to make perfect sense in either of the areas that I'm immersed in learning, my wire sculpture and chess. And whilst you can see how quite obviously learning issues in the world of learning the banjo would obviously neatly map onto a guitar, it's maybe less obvious that they would neatly map onto studying chess. And yet it seems to me they do. And it sort of got me thinking that perhaps that is a very interesting exercise, a way of reading and applicable for those who embark on the MSA, my Master of Self-Administration, or perhaps even more pretentiously, Master of Self-Actualization. If you try and develop yourself through the process of learning something, then looking at how learning is, the learning process is elaborated in one area, if you can find that sort of material, and you don't need to look very far, because I assure you, Brainjo will do the trick, I think it will give you all sorts of interesting ideas in your area of study, and therefore it almost becomes worth reading the book with a pen in hand and doing it chapter by chapter, mapping that out. I do apologize, but this is, I'm just swamped by an Amazonian cloud of buzzy, annoying things. Well, back again, focus, Neil, focus. So I think that's an exercise worth undertaking. Another idea that struck me while I was reading the book is how the best books on learning seem to be written by people who are, how can I put it? Well, they have shown their mastery of learning something in a very concrete sort of way. For example, Brainjo, we have this neuroscientist who, in his early 20s, he already played certain musical instruments, but he started learning to play the banjo. Or another book that is all about the learning process, The Art of Learning. Josh Waitzkin, the international master chess player, learning and mastering push hands Tai Chi. And these are two examples. As a sort of counter examples that lend weight to what I'm saying, I could give you, I think in the interest of politeness, I won't, but I could give you dozens of books about learning by people who seem to have not actually able to demonstrate how they have gone through the learning process, because they don't seem to. You read their biography, and I'm sure they have other interests, but it's not like Josh Turknett, who, when you listen to him playing the banjo, he's obviously a tremendously adept banjo player, and he has dealt with learning this challenging instrument on many different levels or stages of the learning journey. And I think that's what's important. It's a bit like the argument that we used to have when people said, well, you don't really need to know how all that much about maths to teach maths in a high school. And I beg to differ, because if you're teaching people high school maths, you need to have at least some grasp of mathematics on a much deeper level to kind of teach people things that become building blocks further down the way. And actually, Josh talks about this, how one of the problems in learning is there are things that may serve you well at the early part of the journey in reaching a certain sort of level of proficiency, but ultimately will become stumbling blocks later on. And in fact, if you've kind of placed your mental energies and your neuroplasticity efforts in constructing those connections, you will simply have to deconstruct them later on. I mean, this is part of the problem for us adult chess improvers, that you, as much as you're learning new stuff, you're also unlearning all sorts of misconceptions that are deeply embedded in how you think about the game. And as many top players say, you think with your hands rather than your head most of the time. You know, there's an instinctive move that you want to play, and you reach out and play it because it's kind of deeply programmed into how you operate in the world of chess. So I think that's a very important point that we need to bear in mind in this whole discussion. And the book Brainjo sort of leads you on to a very rich vein of heuristic material and sort of meta-learning ideas. And perhaps there isn't a similar book in a field that you're interested in studying. I mean, I'm blessed in the world of chess, I guess, to a point. But perhaps in something else, um, you want to become an orator or learn to code. Maybe there's material teaching you about coding, but not this sort of meta level approach. So that's about it. I'm not sure if this is a shorter video than usual, but frankly, I can't take these insects anymore. And you probably can't take me waving around like this. But damn it, they are so annoying if you stay stuck in one place. Under the trees here with leaves that have gathered water, there's just no escaping them. Well, there is, and that's leaving. So that's what I'm going to do. I trust your lives are filled with joy, and until next week, and hopefully I'll find a dry and insect-free spot, or perhaps the wind will have picked up and blown them away. But until next week, ciao from a sunny Brazil.